Trump says he frequently speaks with Putin about securing peace in Ukraine. Egyptian, Qatari and Israeli officials meet in Cairo to coordinate Gaza aid and evacuations. And Moscow supports a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear issue. The Kremlin has responded to U.S. President Donald Trump's recent statements, including a threat of sanctions on buyers of Russian exports, describing them as serious and requiring detailed analysis. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said some remarks were directly aimed at Russian President Vladimir Putin and emphasized that Russia is ready to continue peace talks awaiting Kiev's response. Peskov also criticized NATO and Western decisions as fueling the ongoing conflict rather than promoting peace. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that frequently speaks with Russian President Vladimir Putin about securing peace over the Ukraine conflict, but expressed frustration with ongoing attacks. Speaking alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in the Oval Office, Trump called Putin a tough guy who has fooled a lot of people over the years. He announced a new policy to impose 100% secondary tariffs on buyers of Russian exports if no peace deal is reached within 50 days, marking a sharp shift in U.S. strategy. Despite setbacks, Trump remains hopeful, telling reporters, "I think we're going to get it done." NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had lauded U.S. President Donald Trump's latest threats of tariffs on buyers of Russian exports as really significant. Rutte revealed Trump called him last Thursday to announce plans to ramp up weapons support for Ukraine. He highlighted the strategic design behind the secondary sanctions aimed at countries still buying Russian exports, urging them to pressure Moscow on peace negotiations. Rutte also praised European allies for stepping up financially to back Ukraine and emphasized the combined economic impact on Russia.
Whatever it takes for Ukraine to be as strong as possible when peace deal is taking place or peace negotiations will start to be in the best possible place at that moment. But you have got to get serious when it comes to these negotiations on a ceasefire or a peace deal, or otherwise we get hit by these secondary sanctions.
Ukrainian President Zelensky has expressed gratitude to U.S. President Donald Trump for his commitment to support the protection of our people's lives. Zelensky's appreciation followed Trump's announcement of a new arms for Kyiv and a 50-day ultimatum for Moscow to agree to a ceasefire or face sanctions. Zelensky also noted a productive discussion with Keith Kellogg, Trump's special representative in Kyiv.
Точно буде корисним на позиції міністра оборони України. Саме у цій сфері зараз максимум ресурсів країни, максимум завдань і дуже багато відповідальності. Розраховую на достатню підтримку.
Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal has submitted his resignation as President Zelensky prepares a sweeping wartime government reshuffle. Zelensky has nominated First Deputy Prime Minister and Economic Minister Yulia Sviridenko, one of his key allies, to replace Shumehel, who is expected to become defense minister. The shake-up comes amid heavy fighting in Ukraine's east and growing fiscal pressures. Zelensky said the new government's focus will be on boosting weapons production and economic reform. Parliament is set to vote on Sviridenko's appointment later this week. During his Ukraine visit, U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg has laid flowers at the Wall of Remembrance. Early, Kellogg met with Ukraine President Zelensky to discuss strengthening Ukraine's air defenses and acquiring weapons with European assistance. Ukrainians are guardedly optimistic about U.S. President Donald Trump's pledge of new weapons, including Patriot air defense missiles, in his ultimatum to Russia. Trump threatened sanctions on buyers of Russian exports if no peace deal is reached within 50 days, which is a significant policy shift. Some existing Patriot batteries from other nations could be rerouted to Ukraine quickly. Ukrainians hope this deadline genuinely pressures Russia, unlike previous unfulfilled timelines. Russia has claimed strikes on Ukrainian military-industrial sites and seized 2 settlements, and also targeting recruitment centers and drone depots. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported repelling 88 Russian assaults, mainly around Pokrovsk and Liman, and noted Russian airstrikes in Chernihiv and Sumy. Russia also claimed to have destroyed 3 aerial bombs and 120 drones. Ukrainian drone attacks has injured 16 people, including a teenager, in the Russian city of Voronezh, damaging residential and commercial buildings. The regional governor reported 12 drones destroyed over Voronezh. Russia's defense ministry claimed 55 Ukrainian drones were downed overnight across 5 regions in the Black Sea. Ukraine has not commented on the attacks. Both sides denied targeting civilians. And for more analysis, we now move on to Salma Al-Fay in our newsroom. Salma?
Thank you, Rana. And for further analysis, we are joined from Moscow by the writer and political researcher, Dr. Asif Mulham. Welcome, sir, to Qnews. Sir, how might President Trump's new policy of secondary tariffs on Russian export buyers maybe impact the dynamics of the conflict and the potential peace negotiations? Sir, can you hear me? Okay, how might President Trump's new policy of the secondary tariffs on Russian export buyers impact the dynamics of the conflict and the potential peace negotiations, do you think?
So in regards to the tariff the U.S. is imposing, I think this is unreal. If these custom tariffs were imposed on Russia, there will be, the sound is really unclear. There is goods of $5 billion imports. If tariffs were imposed on Russia, they are the oil buyers. I think we will face high energy prices. I think the U.S. And the customer, the American customer, will be harmed greatly because they are one of the big traders within the European Union. So the U.S. is trying to test Russia on this.
Dr. Mulhem, what are the key challenges, do you think, Russia faces in responding to these new U.S. tariff threats, as described by the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov?
I think in regards to what Dmitry Peskov said, the challenges in regards maybe Russia as a pressure on the Russian economy, but Russia is used and learned since the war how to deal with these sanctions and how to defend and respond to it. So if there is one consequence of this, it will be very limited and for a very short time.
Mm-hmm. And how significant do you think is the 50-day deadline for a peace deal, and what are the practical implications of such a time frame for all the parties involved?
In regards to the deadline imposed by the U.S. President, I think it's like only a test deadline, and the sound is still unclear. They still are trying to the president doesn't. We know the president doesn't respect deadlines, and I think after a period of time will reverse this deadline, because the war in the U.S. is a European war, not a U.S. war. The war in Russia is European war, not a U.S. war. So the reality cannot change. This will not change anything in the war itself.
And that was Dr. Asif Mulhem. Thank you so much from Moscow, the writer and political researcher. Thank you for joining us on Q News. And now we go back to Rana Al-Assas in our studio. Rana.
Thank you so much, Salman. Now we move on to the latest developments in Gaza. Egypt, Qatar and Israel are holding meetings in Cairo to discuss the logistics of delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza, evacuating the sick and facilitating the return of those stranded. These talks are part of Egypt's broader efforts to broker a ceasefire in Gaza. The meeting have seen progress and alignment on several issues related to the humanitarian provisions of the proposed ceasefire agreement and are scheduled to continue over 2 days. The meetings reflect Egypt's determination to overcome the obstacles facing a potential agreement and its commitment to ensuring that sufficient and appropriate aid reaches the people of Gaza. Gaza-based health authorities have announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on Gaza Strip has climbed to over 58,400 and over 139,300 were also wounded. In the past 24 hours alone, 93 bodies, including 3 retrieved from rubble and 278 injured individuals, were brought to Gaza hospitals. Additionally, 6 aid seekers were killed and over 29 injured, raising the total toll among those seeking humanitarian aid to 844 dead and 5,604 wounded. EU aid chief Hajj al-Habib has said that Israel has not yet fully implemented a recent agreement aimed at improving humanitarian access to Gaza. We've seen some positive developments, al-Habib told reporters, noting some aid trucks and entering but without clear numbers. What is clear is that the agreement is not fully implemented. The EU-Israel deal stroke last week aims to increase aid deliveries and open additional crossings into the besieged enclave. All 3 members of the UN Commission investigating human rights violations in Gaza and Israel have resigned. General Navy Pillay has cited health reasons, while fellow members Chris Sidoti and Milon Kotari stepped down days later. The resignations follow a series of reports accusing Israel of war crimes and genocidal acts, claims Israel rejects as biased. The Commission will submit its final report in October, with a new team to be named in November. UNRWA media advisor Adnan Abu Hasna has warned that Israel's plan to build a humanitarian city in southern Gaza is a pretext for creating mass internment camps and for forcible displacing Palestinians. He accused Israel of using the collapse of healthcare and storages and fuel depletion to pressure civilians into voluntary displacement. The proposed area, just 60 square kilometers, is unfit to host 2 million people, he reported. Abu Hasna urged the international community to act immediately, calling the plan a dangerous step toward permanent expulsion under the guise of humanitarian aid. The United Nations Human Rights Office has warned that Israeli settlers and forces have ramped up violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, in recent weeks. Since October the 7th, 2023, at least 964 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, according to UN figures. Israeli forces and settlers are accused of repeated killings, harassment, and mass home demolitions. Nearly 3,000 homes have been destroyed during the same period. The UN urged accountability and an end to the violence. Israeli occupation forces carried out a large-scale raid and arrest campaign across multiple West Bank governorates early today, detaining over 32 people, Palestinians, including former prisoners and young men. The raids involved violent home invasions, property vandalism, and the closure of roads and checkpoints, intensifying restrictions on movement. This operation is part of an ongoing crackdown by Israeli forces aimed at intimidating civilians, targeting activists, and silencing former detainees. Palestinians lined up with empty pots at a soup kitchen in Gaza City as hunger grips the war-torn enclave. A global hunger monitor warned in May that 500,000 people in Gaza face starvation, with famine likely by September. UNRWA reports 1 in 10 children under 5 are malnourished, an alarming shift for pre-war levels. While Israel blames Hamas for aid theft, Hamas accuses Israel of using starvation as a weapon. UN deliveries remain limited, and the UN has refused to cooperate with the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Palestinians in Gaza buried members of the Azzam family in an improvised graveyard after cemeteries ran out of space due to months of deadly conflict. There are no graves left, said a relative of the victims, after an overnight Israeli airstrike killed several family members, according to local medics. With formal burial grounds full, families are restoring to empty plots of land. Moving on to Damascus, where Syria's presidency has ordered immediate action against any officials committing violations, urging all public and military entities to comply. And the Syrian Foreign Ministry condemned Israel's coordinated attacks on Saudi, holding Israel fully responsible. That comes as Damascus affirms its commitment to protecting all citizens, including the Druze, and reiterated its legitimate right to defend Syrian territory by all legal means. In Lebanon, water levels in the country's largest reservoir, Lake Karun, have dropped to historic lows amid the country's worst drought, threatening farming, electricity and water supply. Inflows to the reservoir during the wet season fell to just 45 million cubic meters, far below the 350 million average. The current 61 million cubic meters of water are unusable due to population, officials reported. Farmers in the Beqa Valley reported unprecedented dry conditions and unreliable irrigation. The government plans to launch a public campaign to curb water use within 10 days. And moving to Iran, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that Moscow supports a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear issue, reaffirming Tehran's stated position against developing nuclear weapons. Speaking after talks with Iran's Abbas Araghchi at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, Lavrov stressed that no evidence has shown Iran is pursuing a bomb. He also defended Iran's right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty to ensure uranium for peaceful energy use.
Обсуждались реалистичные подходы к обеспечению развязки, которая была бы достигнута.
Moving on, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has met with Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani amid rising trade tensions. Tajani warned the EU has prepared $24.5 billion in retaliatory tariffs, with more possible if talks fail. Despite this, he remains hopeful for a deal. EU ministers signaled readiness to respond if U.S. tariffs proceeds. U.S. President Donald Trump recently threatened 30% tariffs on EU and Mexican imports starting August 1st. Russia will launch its first direct flight from Moscow to Pyongyang on July the 27th. The Russian transport minister announced that, operated by Nordwind Airlines, the route will run monthly with an expected flight time of 8 hours. It becomes the second direct air link between Russia and North Korea, alongside Air Korea's Vladivostok Pyongyang service. Tickets to Pyongyang are only available through organized tour packages, according to state media. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has met Chinese President Xi Jinping during the SCO Foreign Ministers meeting in Tianjin. Lavrov conveyed Putin's greetings, and discussions covered bilateral contacts, including preparations for Russia's President Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit to China for the SCO summit and World War II victory commemorations on September the 3rd. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has emphasized good neighborhoodness and mutual respect in talks with the Indian External Affairs Minister. Wang urged both nations to build trust, cooperate, and manage differences for shared success, celebrating 75 years of diplomatic ties. The Indian External Affairs Minister affirmed that his country views China as a development partner, not a rival, seeking deeper cooperation and broader tranquility. China has successfully launched its Tianzhu 9 cargo spacecraft, spending 6.5 tons of supplies to the Tiangong space station. The Long March 7Y-10 rocket lifted off from Hainan and delivering crucial provisions, including life support, 2 Fitian space suits and scientific payloads for the Shenzhou 20 and upcoming Shenzhou 21 cruise. This marks the 4th resupply mission for China's orbiting outpost. And now we move on to broadcast from Washington, D.C., where Trump is speaking.
They are going to pay 19%, and we are going to pay nothing. I think it's a good deal for both parties, but we will have full access into Indonesia. And we have a couple of those deals that are going to be announced. India basically is working along that same line. We're going to have access into India. And you have to understand, we had no access into any of these countries. Our people couldn't go in. And now we're getting access because of what we're doing with the tariffs. So they're paying 19%, and we are not paying anything. and they're going to give us full access into Indonesia. Now, Indonesia has some great product, and they also have some very valuable earths and various other materials. One of the things, as you know, they're known for is very high quality copper, which we'll be using.
Do you believe your tariffs might have led for inflation to increase last month? Do you think they had any role?
Well, we had very little inflation. I don't know. Who do you work for?
USA Today.
What?
USA Today.
Oh, well, they wrote me a beautiful article the other day, so I can't get angry at you. USA Today just wrote a very good article about me. What's that all about? So I can't get angry at you. No, there was very little inflation, as you know. The numbers were very good, very much inside the margin. So we've had no inflation. All we have is we're making a fortune. We are taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. You saw we had a surplus of $25 billion last month, which we haven't had in many, many years. We are doing because I'm able to do it. Nobody else would be able to do it. We have tariffs going on because we want tariffs and we want the money coming into the United States. But more important than the money, there's two aspects to tariff. There's the money, which comes in. The other aspect is that rather than paying the tariffs, the country or the company will build in the United States, make their product in the United States, and that creates jobs. And I would say of the two, probably the more important to me is that. Yeah, please.
Are you on Ukraine's side now?
No, I'm on nobody's side. I want to, you know what the side I'm on? Humanity's side. I want to stop the killing of thousands of people a week. I want to stop the killing. I want the killing to stop in the Ukraine-Russia war. That's the side I'm on.
Mr. President, your daughter-in-law said that there was transparency in the Epstein case. Do you agree with this, sir?
The Attorney General's handled that very well. She's really done a very good job. And I think that when
Humanity, I am on the humanity side. Killing has to stop. I don't want any killing anymore. These are the words of U.S. President Donald Trump that he just said now in a with paparazzi or with the press, and he said that 19% are gonna be paid by, and we are paying nothing. He was referring to Indonesia and full access to, and he will take full access to Indonesia, access because of the tariffs and the high, and he mentioned that Indonesia has high quality of copper that the United States is going to be using. No inflation, making a fortune and $100 billion we haven't had for a million of years, referring to himself that he brought this $100 billion to the United States. Tariffs are this a reason coming in. Money is coming due to the tariffs, and of course this makes good job opportunities. And of course the view is this was the words of Donald Trump. Now that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Trump says he frequently speaks with Putin about securing peace in Ukraine. Egyptian, Qatari and Israeli officials meet in Cairo to coordinate Gaza aid and evacuations. And Moscow supports a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear issue. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour and for our transmission. Q News is transition for today. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching, and Rana Al-Qassas. Until we meet again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Cairo local time. It's goodbye.